answers, and John Brennan certainly seems to be a man at the center of all of this. Will,
Yeah.
I next want to move on and talk to you about. You said you got this story from the Wall Street Journal on a possible change in the U.S. like negotiating position on New START that would really be huge and potential breakthrough.
Yeah. So this is a pretty big development that kind of slipped by me. I didn't notice I didn't notice this until a couple days after it was reported. But you got this piece in the Wall Street Journal saying that the U.S. has now apparently dropped its demand that China be involved in any extension of the New START treaty, which is, as we've talked about in the show, it's a very important arms reduction treaty between the U.S. and Russia. And it kind of limits how many nuclear warheads we can have out in the world at any given time. And that treaty is set to expire in February. But up until last week, U.S. officials were insisting that China would have to be included in negotiations to extend that agreement, which was kind of like a crazy fantasy that it risked kind of imploding and destroying the whole deal because China is not interested in joining this agreement. They've said that many times. Their nuclear arsenal is like 10 times smaller than the US's or Russia's. So it just would have vastly complicated the whole negotiation process if they were going to try to cram China in there. But now apparently Trump's arms control envoy, Marshall Billingsley, the guy who, talked about an arms race, kicking off an arms race, how we'll spend China into oblivion. This same guy now says that the U.S. is going to look to do a separate arms deal with Beijing, and that they're actually going to now focus on getting New START hammered out with the Russians first. So I think that's a good thing. Ultimately, like it was looking like they might allow the New START to just explode and just let it expire over all this China stuff. And now it's seeming like maybe that was more of a bluff and that they were just trying that as a negotiation tactic. And now they're kind of, abandoning that.
Right. One thing that I think more and more people are starting to put out, and it certainly has become true if it wasn't even 6 months ago, and that is there simply isn't time at this point to negotiate a larger deal with Russia and China. We have 6 months to extend New START. Start with that, and then you could start to build some kind of deal between Russia, China, and the U.S. a trilateral deal because a New START will then be extended for 5 years. One that I guess recurring problems with the whole bringing China into this theme, well, is just the difference in the nuclear arsenals are. China has 300 weapons, and I'm not even sure how many of them are deployed at any given time, whereas the U.S. and Russia have, 1,500 plus newts. And so in a lot of ways for China, they say it doesn't make sense for us to join. And, it would be hard to argue that it would mean the same thing for the U.S. to give up 100 newts, which is a 15th of our arsenal, and for China to do, which is a third. So there's massive problems there. Now, I have heard of doing like percentage reductions, in which case, again, you kind of have the problem the U.S. is going to destroy 100 nukes as 150, and China's going to do it, it's like 30 or less. And so, Mr. Art of the Deal, I don't think it is going to be like inclined to do something like that. But at the same time, do we have any idea on the U.S. still seems to want to do some kind of trilateral arms deal that includes China administration. It is such a bullish kind of policy where it's gonna be our way. We're gonna get this deal done the way we want it, and if not, it's not gonna get done.
I mean, I expect we're still going to see sort of like, the U.S. has this sort of like negotiating tactic, especially the Trump administration and his people, that they are more brash and more demanding, it seems. They demand that the other side gives up everything before they even, come to the negotiating table. However, this is a sort of softening of their position. Like their position was harder before, demanding that China be included in New START. So, it's a softened position. Although I do expect they'll probably try to, put some pressure on the Chinese to come to this other separate arms control accord. Like I don't expect that the U.S. is going to be real generous in negotiating with China there. But at least we have seen this like slight softening of their position in terms of New START.
Right. So, just to get into the weeds a little bit more on this, was this just a statement by the arms negotiator, or do we know if there's a real backing from the administration on it? It seems a lot of times the problem with Trump's administration is that him and the people who actually implement his policy, and we'll talk about this with Iraq shortly, are never on the same page, it seems. And so, for example, weeks before Hanoi, you have now the State Department number two, Stephen Biegun, saying at a speech that the U.S. was ready to kind of do this sensible kind of deal with North Korea, where we reduce, some of our sanctions, and then they give up parts of their nuclear program. But then weeks later, Trump completely 180s and does something else. So does this signal an actual change in the Trump administration policy, or is this just some one-off statement from some official who, its job it is to get a deal done, understands that this is the way to do it, and so he's, out saying this is what we need to do, and in reality, that's just not the position of the rest of the Trump administration.
Honestly, I'd have to go back and look at exactly how the Wall Street Journal sourced this. It did seem like Billingsley had like a real, was given permission to go on record and talk about this stuff. I forget exactly how they sourced it though, but again, it did seem like the administration was endorsing this position.